Hey now, hey now, this is what dreams. Oh, hey. This video is not about the Lizzie McGuire movie. Hi everyone, welcome back to my channel. So sorry for being MIA for a couple weeks. For personal reasons, I needed a bit of a break. I didn't have as much time to film videos or to put the effort into them that I like to put into them. There were a couple times where I could have filmed a video, but it would have been very just thrown together at the last minute, and I don't like that. I like to really research my videos and plan my videos. You know, I'm just a person with severe OCD. So thank you for allowing me to have that little break. I needed it. And I'm back now, and I will be posting consistently again. And I'm a fully vaccinated human now, so that's really exciting. But yeah, so I'm back now. I'm sorry I was away. Needed to be for personal reasons, but I'm back now. And thank you to all my new subscribers that have just found my channel. Welcome to the channel, and I hope you enjoy all the videos that I have coming up. So let's get into today's video. Today we are talking about pendulums. So this video is going to be all about using pendulums. This was requested by a few different people, so thank you for the request. Buddy, you gotta lay down. I can't just gaze at you. He wants uninterrupted eye contact. He doesn't want to be pet. He wants uninterrupted eye contact. So we're going to talk all about pendulums. We're going to talk about how you use them, why you use them, what they're used for. Hello, Giles. Yes, I know. And Giles is going to need a lot of affection, so that's going to keep us busy too. So pendulums are a... Pendulums are a divination tool. He just keeps pawing my chest. It's really hard to focus. So pendulums are a divination tool. So like any divination tool, you use the pendulum to ask questions and receive answers for guidance. No, he's playing with the pendulum. Okay. Get your wits together, sir. Buddy, my necklace is not a toy. You're really being quite distracting today. He wants to play with my necklace. Stop. Stop with the claws and the teeth. Jeez. And one of my favorite things about pendulums that is different than a lot of other divination methods is that you can use pendulums to ask yes or no questions. With a lot of divination methods, if you ask a yes or no question, you're not going to get a clear answer. I personally work a lot in the Akashic Records, and the Akashic Records is not a place you can ask yes or no questions. So pendulums are really great for receiving very specific and clear answers to your questions. So that's why I really like it as a divination method. So this is my pendulum. It's just a simple quartz crystal on a chain. It's the only pendulum I have. If you're new to pendulums and you haven't purchased one yet, they do make much more elaborate, like beautiful, more intricate pendulums, which is great. I mean, whenever I see them in the store, I'm always tempted. But this is the only one I have. It's the one that spoke to me when I was first looking for a pendulum. It's just a very simple quartz crystal, and that's all you need. You don't need anything fancy. So you can get a really beautiful, fancier one, or you can just get something like I have, just a quartz crystal on a string, essentially. So there are a lot of different pendulum options, and they're all equally good. So just pick whatever pendulum speaks to you. They do make pendulums out of different kinds of crystals, so maybe you can think about what you do a lot in your practice, what you work with a lot in your practice, and then research crystals, and then find a crystal that will complement your practice. For me personally, I do a lot of healing work with my pendulum on myself and on others during healing sessions, so I like the the clear quartz simply because it can work with any kind of situation, and it's not going to necessarily bring any of its own attributes. It's just a baseline quartz crystal that has a lot of energy and power, the ability to clear and cleanse, but also the ability to amplify and energize. So that's why I went with the clear quartz. So let's talk about how you use the pendulum, and then we'll talk more about the different things you can use a pendulum for. So if you're sitting down to use a pendulum for a reading, either for yourself or for someone else, you have a couple different options of how to conduct that reading. The first option, and the one I personally use the most frequently, is very simple, and all you need is the pendulum. I will start by holding the pendulum by the little top part, and you want to make sure you're not, dangling the chain off your thumb or holding too much of the chain like this. You don't want to wrap your finger around the chain. You want to make sure it's uninhibited by you and your hand. So just hold it by the top little part. Every pendulum has like a little crystal at the top. I'm not sure if you can see that, but that's what I hold it by to make sure that I'm not impacting the way the crystal moves. So you'll hold it up and you will set your intention for the reading. Then you're going to ask the pendulum to show you what it will do when the answer is yes. So you'll say, show me yes, or what is yes. You'll wait for it to do its movement, and then you'll do the same thing with no. You'll say, show me what no is, and it'll show you no. And then from there, you can start asking your questions. You'll ask the question, it'll move in either a yes movement or a no movement, and that will give you your answer. Sometimes with a pendulum, you won't get a yes movement or a no movement. You might get it flying all around erratically. You might get it not moving at all. You might get it vibrating in place. Those can mean different things depending on the question and depending on the circumstance. Sometimes these things can mean I can't answer your question or I won't answer your question. Sometimes that can mean that there isn't a simple yes or no answer to your question, so the pendulum is struggling to figure out if it's a yes or a no. So I would recommend, if you're using a pendulum for a reading and you're doing the yes-no method, you can, if you get an answer that's unclear or confusing, or the pendulum struggles to answer you for something, use another divination method to try to get another clearer answer, and that might help to clear things up. But in terms of readings with your pendulum, you can also use a pendulum grid. This is where you lay a grid down on your altar table or wherever you're doing your divination, and you hold the pendulum over it, just as we did before with the yes-no method. You would have the grid here, and you would hold the pendulum over it in the center of it, and the grid would have answers on it. So based on where the pendulum swings to, you know that that's the answer. It's pointing to an answer on that grid. And there are so many different pendulum grids. I will put some examples of pendulum grids on the screen. And pendulum grids can be really great for getting very specific answers. I've done pendulum work to learn more information about my past lives. Using a grid, I learned what year that life happened, what decade that life happened. So you can get very specific information from using pendulum grids. And you can draw your own pendulum grid. Once you've seen a few examples of pendulum grids, you can draw your own and put in the answers that you're trying to discern from with your question. So that is how you do a reading with a pendulum, where you're asking questions to the pendulum and having the pendulum move to answer your questions. The next way you can use a pendulum is in healing. So the way I personally use my pendulum for healings, to check on the health of each chakra. So you can hold the pendulum, just as we did before, over the chakra, and based on its movement, it will tell you how that chakra is doing. If it's overactive, if it's deficient, if it's spinning in a clockwise direction or a counterclockwise direction. A pendulum can tell you if a chakra is healthy. And you would do this method similarly to how you do the yes-no method. Beforehand, you would ask your pendulum to show you the movement it will make when a chakra is unbalanced, or the movement it'll make when a chakra is deficient or overactive. And then you can write these movements down in your mirror book. And when you're doing that check of the chakras on your client or on yourself, you'll know what those movements mean. And every pendulum is different in my experience. So get to know your specific pendulum. So for me personally, my pendulum always does the same things when checking on the state of a chakra. So I know the movements that my pendulum makes and I know what they mean. So get to know your pendulum and then you'll know the language of your pendulum. The next way to use your pendulum is to communicate with beings and deities. So this was part of the request. Someone wanted to know how they can use their pendulum to communicate with the deities that they work with. So if you're wanting to use a pendulum to communicate with an energetic being, whether they're a spirit guide, the spirit of an ancestor or a loved one who has passed on, a deity, an angel, any energetic being, you're going to evoke that being so that they're present with you in the space. And then you're going to hold your pendulum, just as we have for all these methods, and you're going to ask the being that you have called on to use the pendulum to communicate with you. So then from there, you will ask your questions, and the being, whether they're a deity or an angel or whatever kind of spirit they are, they will use the pendulum to answer your questions. The pendulum is a very straightforward divination tool, and that's something I really love about it. Not a lot of bells and whistles, it's just you and your pendulum, and you can get really specific answers and use it for so many different things. So if you're wanting to communicate with a being using your pendulum, it's as simple as inviting the being to be present with you, informing the being you're going to ask questions and you want them to use the pendulum to answer them, and then start asking your questions. You can even use a pendulum to find things. Pendulums can be used for dowsing, so you can use them to find things underground. You can hold a pendulum over a map to find something. So you can dangle the pendulum over the map and the pendulum will move toward that object that you're looking for. So pendulums have a lot of uses. Now let's talk a little bit about some of my tips for working with a pendulum. First is that when you first get your pendulum, I recommend carrying it with you for a while, for a few days or for a week. Keep it in your pocket or keep it in your purse, keep it in your backpack, just so the two of you can get to know each other energetically. I find that pendulum readings go better when the pendulum knows the energy of the person holding the pendulum. So when I first purchased this pendulum, I carried it in my pocket or my purse, depending on if I had pockets or not, for about a week. And then I started using it. So you don't have to do that, but I highly recommend it. It just helps the two of you get acquainted with each other and helps for more accurate and clear readings. The next thing is when you're working with a pendulum, you have to decide, like a lot of spiritual tools, you have to decide, is this going to be for me? Or am I going to use it to do readings on others? Am I going to use it to do healings on others? Am I going to use it only for me? Am I the only person that can touch it and the only person that can do a reading with it? Am I the only person that can ask it questions? Or do I feel comfortable doing readings for myself and others? So ask yourself all these questions, because with each spiritual tool, it's important that you know how you feel about using it for others or with others. And I want to make a whole video about this with all the different spiritual tools, but for me personally, I don't read anyone but myself with my pendulum. Unless I'm doing a healing session, I will sometimes check on the health of a chakra with the pendulum, but I don't answer questions for people with this pendulum. I only answer questions for myself with this pendulum. I do know some practitioners who have multiple pendulums. One is for just them, and the other is for reading other people. So That's an option too. If you want to be able to do readings for other people, but you're worried about their energies muddying up your readings with the pendulum, you can get a whole separate pendulum that's only for reading others, and that way the energy of other people and their questions isn't going to muddy up your readings with your pendulum. The other tip I have is that before each reading, you do a gentle cleansing of the pendulum. Just a gentle one, especially if, for me, I use this pendulum only for me, pretty much. So I don't want to completely cleanse it every time that I give it a little cleansing before a reading. I want it to still remember me and still be attuned to my energies. So I'll just give it a quick little smoke cleansing through some cedar smoke or through some rosemary smoke, some lavender smoke, and that does the job. If you're using a pendulum to read others, I recommend giving it a more intense cleaning after each reading. That way, when you do a reading for another person in the future, they're not getting weird, muddied readings from the last person you read. So give it a cleansing before each divination session, especially if you're using it on other people. Give it a real good cleansing between each session. Whenever I use this to check on the chakras of other people, I give it a much more intense cleansing than when I'm just reading myself. I also recommend with your pendulum charging it under the full moon, especially since pendulums are usually crystals. So crystals can benefit a lot from being charged under the full moon. So I do that usually every other month. I take my crystals out to charge under the full moon. So I'll take my pendulum out with them to give it a little charge. And that can just help with the clarity of your answers and the strength of your answers coming through. If you find that your pendulum is sometimes giving you confusing answers or saying yes and then saying no, and or moving in ways that just don't make any sense, like if you're coming away from your readings feeling more confused than when you sat down, maybe give it a cleansing, charge it under the full moon, try again. Carry it on you for a few days, try again. So these are things that you can do to help make sure that your readings are accurate and strong. Now, lastly, I have a book recommendation for you all, and that book is A Little Book of Pendulum Magic by DJ Conway. I feel like I have recommended so many DJ Conway books on my channel, and this is one of the books that I have that I highly recommend for pendulum work. It's nice because it's not too bulky, and it talks about basically everything that you can do with a pendulum, and even gives you pendulum grids. So like we talked about before, there are all these pendulum grids in it, information about movements of the pendulum, all different kinds of information, all having to do with pendulums. So in my opinion, this is kind of the only book you'll ever need about pendulums. If you're just starting out, it is a great book to get you started. And even if you are more well-versed in your pendulum work, this book can be a great way to give you new things to do with your pendulum, just new methods and new things to try. Because you can even do more involved things with a pendulum, like getting your tarot cards out and then holding your pendulum over the tarot cards, and doing readings that way based on which tarot card it swings toward. So that is all the information I have to share with you guys about pendulum work. And thank you to everyone who requested this video. Don't forget to like this video and subscribe to my channel so you don't miss any of my future content. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I will see you soon. Blessed be.